Welcome to 2 hours, no traffic, a New York, Philadelphia sports show. I am your host, Ben Harris, joined as always by my co-host, Philly Brandon, and we are brought to you by Sideline Sports. Check them out on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Sideline Sports. You can listen to a variety of different sports shows, but I'll tell you this, you're not going to find a better New York, Philadelphia sports podcast than ours.
That is the truth. We got everything going on in New York and Philly right now, which is quite a bit. The teams who are, engaging in a little cannibalism as far as this podcast is concerned. I'm stealing from you. You're not, you stole a couple guys from me. We'll get into that later, but that turned out to be all smoke and mirrors, as it appears.
Yeah. So you want me to get right into it? The Michigas, as we say in Yiddish, that's happening in Brooklyn.
Sure that.
All right. So after one of the most anxiety-riddled Mondays of my life, it was announced, I think it was like 5:30 on Monday, that Kyrie Irving, after all the speculation of him potentially leaving the Nets and Kevin Durant getting traded and the entire franchise crumbling, turns out, Brandon, my source from last week was right. I said it on the show. Not going to shout this person out. They're going to remain anonymous because you don't reveal sources. But they said Kyrie Irving leaving the Nets was all smoke, and they were right because he opted in to his 1-year player option for, I think it's $37.5 million. So he's back. Kevin Durant is back, and Sean Marks has some work to do this offseason. But what Nets fans are happy about is we finally get to see not only 7-11 on the court together again for hopefully a whole season, but we also get to see a healthy former Philadelphia 76er by the name of Benjamin Simmons play for the Brooklyn Nets. I don't think his real name is Benjamin, by the way.
Probably not. It might just be Ben. But, I mean, for that matter, you're assuming you're going to get to see Ben. Health-wise, you're probably going to get to see Ben. I live in a world where I'm always 70% sure of his next move. Kyrie leaves me sitting around 40% sure of his next move at any given moment. I have mixed emotions from my other Nets people that I keep in touch with. I tend to agree with your line of thinking. I think Kyrie coming back is a slam dunk for the Nets because you were too committed to do anything else. I have a couple other people who will remain nameless who take the what I like to call the moral high road, where it's like he's not about the Nets, we don't want him. Look, you don't have that option. Whether he's about the Nets or not, there's no one out there that's going to replace Kyrie. Moreover, there were no offers on Kyrie that were worth a damn. I mean, the Lakers apparently put together a pretty menial package. So there was never a scenario where he didn't come back, it seemed like.
Yeah, this was a big matter of both sides had a stance. The Nets had a legitimate stance. Kyrie and his agent, who's his stepmother, did not have a legitimate stance, and their stance was Kyrie deserves a max contract. And the Nets basically said he doesn't. And Kyrie said, well, I think on the open market I'm worth a lot. And the Nets said,
what was he humbled?
The Nets said, we don't think so. So, they granted him permission to seek a sign and trade. The Lakers were like, hey, we'll give you Russell Westbrook. The Nets were like, no, thank you.
Nope.
And that's
Who
really
makes
how
more money, by the way.
Oh yeah. He what did he accept his 1-year $47 million player option? That's insane based on the season he had last year. But no, the Nets, look, I was part of the angry mob with the pitchforks who was calling for Sean Marks' job, who was angry with Joe Tsai. And it turns out those guys know how to negotiate a little bit. They don't care about being publicly shamed. They held firm on their position, and they got their guy for at least one more year. The one thing that is slightly concerning, and Brian Windhorst likes to bring this up every day on SportsCenter.
I'm starting to like him less and less, but continue.
Oh, he's tough. Basically, what he's saying is even though Kyrie opted in, Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving are still not in touch with the Brooklyn Nets. They haven't talked to Sean Marks, which is sort of hurting them in free agency. Because I don't know if you saw this, Patty Mills declined his player option with the Brooklyn Nets for around $6 point something million.
Which is more than he's worth on the open market, in my personal opinion.
Right. And also, he was a huge part of what the Nets were trying to build last year as far as culture. You get a guy from the Spurs like Patty Mills, he might not be the best on the team, but you know what you're going to get from him night in, night out. That's hopefully a few three-pointers, but just really a guy who's going to play harder than anybody on the court. And the fact that he wasn't – and this is a guy who, by the way, when the Nets acquired Ben Simmons, Patty Mills was like, hey, me and Ben come from the same country. We're boys. We grew up together. I got him. Mm-hmm. Well, now he's gone. So it's just slightly concerning that the reports that you hear that Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving aren't 100%. I don't know if committed is the right word, but right now it just doesn't seem like they're helping Sean Marks attract free agents.
No, it doesn't seem like it. I don't think losing Patty Mills in the offseason is the death knell for the Nets. I mean, he was nice to have. But it's not like you're really short on point guards. I mean, Seth Curry has competently run the point in the past for a contender like the Sixers. We'll get to him in a second because he's kind of up in the air himself. And then you could just get Kyrie back. But it is a little odd that they have to realize that the team you have right now isn't going to win a title. I just don't think you have enough at the moment. Assuming Andre Drummond hits the road, Patty Mills is already gone. You don't know what Joe Harris looks like after a year away from the game. There's just a lot of question marks. Blake Griffin's not coming back. So you really can't rest on your laurels. And it seems as though Durant and Kyrie are in full-blown off-season mode where it's like me on a long weekend. Like, I don't talk to my boss. Well, I'm not the CEO of the company either. I don't have to talk to my boss. They absolutely need to be recruiting guys, be talking to Joe Tsai, be talking to Sean Marks, figuring out targets, and it doesn't seem like any of that's going on.
So here's how I kind of view the Nets, and then I think we can move on because I'm going to give you the absolute perfect analogy, right? You've seen the movie Jaws. Okay. So when Kyrie Irving opted into his one-year player option, it was like not the very end of the movie, but it was that moment where everyone on the boat thinks that they killed Jaws. Yeah. Remember, they stab him, and then he's in the water, he's bleeding, and they're like, "Oh, we did it." I haven't seen the movie in a while, so. But my point being, this isn't over, right? Jaws can still come up out of the water with a huge gaping hole of blood and still try to attack everybody. And what I mean by that is, Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant, until Nets fans see them speaking with Sean Marks, until we see them speaking with Joe Tsai, anything can happen. Exactly. Kyrie can still be traded. Kevin Durant can still sour on the Nets. We're not out of the water yet. We still have Jaws lurking. So for me, I'm happy that we dodged the Kyrie Irving bullet. I'm glad, by the way, he would have been absolutely insane, clinically insane, to take that $6 million I forget what it's called, but that $6 million contract from the Lakers and leave the $30 million on the table. That would have been ridiculous for him to do. So kudos
also
on Kyrie.
Wasn't even completely his call because the Nets would have had to agree to that trade package, and it was horrible.
Well, no, I think if he declined his player option, the Lakers could have just got him for that, and he would have got nothing, and the Nets would have got nothing.
Yeah, but the Nets only gave him permission to seek a sign-and trade.
Okay.
So they would have had to done a deal with the Lakers.
But what if he doesn't opt in to the player option? You understand what I'm saying? He could have become a restricted free agent.
Yeah, the Nets just weren't going to let him walk.
That's fair. Maybe I don't remember it, or I at least know it as well as I should. But you're probably right. My point being, no person is going to leave $30 million on the table to play in Los Angeles instead of Brooklyn. I just think that's absolutely ridiculous. And good for Kyrie. He wised up. He opted in. The way he did it was great. Leaking it to Shams Charania. Shams Charania puts out a quote from Kyrie, and then Kyrie goes on Twitter and he posts a GIF from Shameless of a young boy basically saying, "I know who I am." It's never a dull day in the world of the Brooklyn Nets. There's always something going on. But I'll tell you this, as long as we have some type of championship hope, I don't care about the drama. I really don't. In fact, I was slightly annoyed that the Nets wouldn't offer Kyrie and his agent what they wanted, because at the end of the day, you are not going to find a better player right now on the open market than Kyrie Irving. Having said that, I'm happy he's back for now. I'm happy KD's back for now. And I want Sean Marks to start to do his job and build this championship roster, because the 3 years that those two guys have been here, they've won one playoff series against a beaten up Celtics team last year. They got swept by the Celtics this year. They lost in 7 games to a Milwaukee Bucks team that eventually won the championship, and they have not lived up to their championship aspirations. And everybody on Nets Twitter can say it's because of injuries. They can say it's because of the pandemic. I don't care. Whatever the excuse is, it's irrelevant because they haven't done it. So we'll see what happens this year. But I want to get to your Sixers, Brandon, because a lot is going on in Philadelphia with former Brooklyn Net James Harden.
Yeah, and speaking of falling short of championship aspirations, I mean, the Sixers, you can say the same. I mean, we've won a playoff series each of the last 4 years without, the bubble notwithstanding. But, the second round's still not good enough for a team that's at one point had Jimmy Butler, Tobias Harris, JJ Redick, Ben Simmons, Joel Embiid. Even just this past year, I have a young star in Tyrese Maxey, Tobias Embiid. So we brought in James Harden. And James Harden apparently has taken that to heart, and he's pulling a page out of the Tom Brady playbook, where he is opting out of his option for $40-something million, which would have been his cap hit this year. He's going to let the Sixers go make their moves, get their guys, and then Harden's is going to take what's left. I love it. It's a big team move. I think it's great for Harden's reputation, which wasn't always that of the best team player. Since he's come to Philly, he's been that way, but I know his prior destinations towards the end in Houston, and then, of course, at Brooklyn, people wouldn't necessarily consider him a team first guy. So this is a huge move. But what we do with it is the question. Everyone wants PJ Tucker. We're obsessed with PJ Tucker. I think he's a big addition. He's 37. He's 6'5". He plays center. We were not PJ Tucker away from a championship last year. I don't care what you try to sell me. So he's a nice pickup. That's fine. There's got to be more moves. And my biggest fear is that he's the only move, is that Daryl Morey gets comfortable, much like your Jaws scenario. He goes out, he gets PJ Tucker, he quiets the masses, and then walks away. It's not going to be enough. There's teams loading up. We'll get to them later. But what do you think about Harden all of a sudden becoming team first, Mr. Championship, James Harden?
Okay, so the first thing I want to say is James Harden is 32 years old. He's not old, but if he performs on this contract, he could get one more decent contract in his career. So that's the first thing I want to say. Second thing I want to say, how good was he in the playoffs for you guys last year?
Up and down. I mean, he had games. He hasn't figured out a way to thrive with Embiid, and neither really has Maxey. Because there was games where Embiid was cold, you'd see Harden go for 36 and win us a game. And then you'd see games where Embiid was dominant and Harden would kind of become like the beta male, and like the worst way to put that, but like he'd fall behind. So up and down.
So the fact that he wasn't like superstar James Harden for you guys, I don't think he could have accepted that ridiculous number that he was owed. He has to restructure, and he has to be a team player right now, because you saw that Philadelphia wasn't good enough last year to even beat the Miami Heat, right? The other thing I do want to say about James Harden is apparently he's getting back in the gym. He's trying to work out. Do you, Brandon, as a Sixers fan, do you think he can get back to that physique and that physical sort of specimen he wasn't used to?
So until yesterday, I didn't. I thought it was like, a good gesture. I'm going to work out more, but there was nothing holding him to that. When he put money on the table and he said, I'm willing to take less to win a championship, I believe it now, because he's financially incentivized to do it, and he put his money where his mouth is. Like, anyone can say they're going to work hard. Ben Simmons is the king of the offseason hoop mixtape trickery. But as soon as Harden started putting millions of dollars on the line to win a title, now I'm bought in.
And I'll tell you this, the final part of all this is his relationship with Daryl Morey. Those guys are very close. I think there's a reason he wanted to play in Philadelphia. Obviously, the prospect of playing with one of the best centers in the league in Joel Embiid, but him and Morey were very tight in Houston. And I think if he's going to take a discount for anybody, it's going to be the guy that got him paid in Houston.
Exactly. And he knows there's like a trust factor there where like, so it's being misreported in a lot of places. This is not a 1-year prove it deal where he knocks down some money. He's still going to get a 2 or 3 year deal with the Sixers, which is awesome if you're the Sixers, in my opinion, because you're getting them 2 to 3 years at a discount. Like when he signs this deal, it's active for at least 2. You know, the 3rd year he's not going to play on it. He'll want to restructure. That's one thing. But you're not getting a one and done where James Harden might pop off and go for 30 a game and then leave you. So you got that little bit of assurance. And he also trusts Daryl Morey. He knows if he pops off and he does his part, there's going to be a payday on the other end. Like his guy is running the show.
And what this does for the Philadelphia 76ers, and by the way, Windhorst reported on ESPN that James Harden will reduce his salary down to the mid-30s. What this
That's
does
huge. That's like $12 million off.
It is. What this does for Daryl Morey and Philadelphia is it opens up a lot more options on what you guys can do in free agency, what you can do on the trade market. It allows you, $12 million more dollars to play with, which is a lot of money when we're talking about these mid-level player exceptions.
Well, we had already used our mid-level exception to bring in Melton. So that money disappeared. So had Harden not made this move, we're cash strapped right now. We don't have the money to offer PJ Tucker the contract we're offering him, which will never make sense to me. But now we have a little bit of breathing room to still do the PJ Tucker deal, which is probably going to involve shipping Matisse out to clear some cap. But we'll be able to get PJ Tucker instead of just PJ Tucker, which I think is enormous.
And Nets fans are so angry right now, right? Because this is a guy who we were paying a lot of money to while he was here. The thought process was he wanted to stay in Brooklyn. He wanted a max from Brooklyn. And it didn't work out the way that either side wanted it to. So he goes to Philly. All of a sudden, he's a generous Gary over there in Philly. He's willing to take less money to win a championship. And I got to say, Nets fans are slightly peeved about this. Where was this team guy when we needed him, right? Because when we were struggling, he pretty much said, I don't want to play with you guys anymore. I'm out.
I think as a Nets fan, you have to start being a little bit introspective in the fact that there's so many strange things and so many, you can call them coincidences, whatever you want to call them, that have been circling the Nets now since Kyrie and Kevin Durant came to town, that not all of it is circumstantial. Like there is a level of dysfunction in that organization that exists. I mean, Kevin Durant's been drop dead loyal to it, which has masked up a lot until now. Kyrie Irving's been the same way, which covers up a lot. But it's really been a revolving door in Brooklyn. You have the championship expectations haven't been met. And, for what it's worth, the Sixers have been the more stable organization as far as people wanting to come here, retaining stars. I'm not a Doc Rivers guy. People want to play for Doc Rivers for whatever the reason. Same with Daryl Morey. It's a bit of a more attractive situation to make those kind of moves.
Absolutely. You're not going to get a rebuttal or a disagreement from me. I really think that the Nets have struggled on allowing their star players to have a certain power in the organization. But then when, the general manager and the owner want to speak up and make decisions, the star players are like, hey, we thought it was up to us. Yeah. So it is a little bit it has been slightly toxic in Brooklyn for the last 3 seasons. And we've seen that sort of come to a boiling point on several occasions. But I do give Philadelphia credit. After the disappointing end to last season, after the very disappointing end to the season before that, you guys have done a great job in the offseason of rebounding, getting guys, drafting guys like Tyrese Maxey who have come in and been great. Keeping and retaining a Tobias Harris who's been all right. And again, you guys know you're a few pieces away, but as long as you have a guy in Joel Embiid who is committed to winning in Philadelphia, that is something that can't go overlooked, right? Because that has been the constant for however many years. I envy you guys in a little bit in the fact that you guys have stability and also one of our best players left our organization to go play for you guys. But I know you want to get into a certain defensive specialist for the 76ers, a man by the name of Matisse Thybulle. How was that
Yes.
pronunciation, Brandon?
I mean, he's Australian, but
I thought it was still pretty good.
yeah. Yeah. So everybody who follows the Sixers knows that before Tyrese Maxey came here, Matisse Thybulle was like the best thing since sliced bread. He was doing the vlogs. He was playing elite defense. He still is, but I'll get into that in a minute. But man, that whole COVID thing, like him not being vaxxed, not telling anybody, soured a lot of people. And after that, you started to see the leniency with, well, he gambles a lot, but it's okay because he gets steals. That disappeared. It was a lot more critical. It was, you're constantly getting beat because you're gambling. His shot didn't take a step forward this year. I mean, I know he put the work in. It's not a Ben Simmons situation. I know he didn't work on a shot. It's just not there. So you're a defender who gambles too much. You're not a 3-and-D guy, which in the NBA, if you're not a 3-and-D guy, what are you? And you weren't really there for us when we needed you in Toronto. So it went from a guy where, like, if we tried to trade him last year, the fans would have rioted, to this year, we are shopping Matisse Thybulle to anybody who will listen just to free up some cap space to bring someone else in. I don't necessarily agree with it. I don't think he's chopped liver. I don't think he should be a salary dump, but I'm in the vast minority at the moment.
I know the salaries are totally different, but I think a good example is like Frank Ntilikina when he was with the Knicks for years. Knicks fans loved this guy, defensive specialist. Whenever he got in the game, he would get a steal. He would piss off the opposing player. I think one game he might have got into it with LeBron James back in the day. You loved what Ntilikina gave you, but on the offensive end, his offensive skill set was so anemic. He was such a streaky shooter. He couldn't do much that eventually when I don't remember if he was traded or the Knicks released him, nobody really was that angry. Now, I think that Matisse Thybulle is a little bit better than Ntilikina on the offensive end. He can at least hit a few open shots.
End. They're in a different league.
You're right. You're absolutely
right. He's a
right.
second-team All-NBA defender.
But I think the principle of when you're on offense, if it's 4-on-5, you're at a disadvantage. And in today's league, with the offensive firepower that you see around the NBA, it is hard. Like those guys like the Andre Robersons, right? Like the specifically defensive players, they don't really exist that much. Rudy Gobert might be one of the best defensive centers in the NBA, and he is extremely I guess he's valued as like, the bottom half of the top 10 centers in the league, right? Like you can name 5 or 6 guys I think you would prefer on your team before Rudy Gobert just because of their offensive games. And Rudy's a better defender than all of those guys. But like, give me Embiid, give me Jokic, give me Karl-Anthony Towns, give me Anthony Davis. I'm missing 1 or 2 guys. Can you think of any? Oh, give me Bam Adebayo over Rudy Gobert. Give me those guys, right?
Yeah, you can play on both ends of the floor. I know we're talking about Matisse, but you can only go so deep into Matisse Thybulle. Something I wanted to just bring up that I can't take credit for. I got to see who actually pushed it out there. Oh, some random guy named Alan Ivermectin, so that's not worth mentioning. But he made a good point that Michael Rubin, the at one point minority owner of the Sixers, stepped down from his role to take a controlling interest in the brand Fanatics, the jersey. Okay. Started in Philly, started in KOP. He's, big guy.
Familiar with Fanatics.
Yeah. So the running joke is whatever money Harden doesn't make with the Sixers, he will get some sort of sponsorship through Fanatics because he's a former Sixers owner and he can sign players to sponsorship deals. So he might take 12 less from the Sixers and then sign a deal with Fanatics for 10. Not a bad hustle.
I think that's going to happen.
It wouldn't surprise me, and it's completely legal. I mean, it's a way around the system. We're running out of time, but I really quickly want to get your thoughts on 2 things. Atlanta Hawks, they were enough a couple years ago, not quite enough last year. They go out, they move 3 first-rounders, a future first-round swap, and Danilo Gallinari to get DeJounte Murray from San Antonio. How much does that move the needle?
I don't think it moves the needle a lot. I don't know why, but I don't love the combination of Trae Young and DeJounte Murray. Trae Young is a player that needs the ball in his hands. DeJounte Murray is a walking triple-double. When you're a walking triple-double, you need the ball in your hands. I'm not sure how those two guys are going to mesh. I like the risk by the Hawks, and I like sort of getting a player of Murray's caliber because Murray is a superstar in the making in this league. Yeah. I just don't know if I like him or Trae Young off the ball. I don't love that backcourt. I do love that the Hawks traded for DeJounte Murray mainly because the Knicks weren't able to get him. Knicks fans were very hype on Murray. I know they're interested in Brunson, and we'll get into that in a second. But the fact that the Hawks came in and swooped DeJounte Murray from the Knicks really makes me happy because I really dislike the Knicks.
I'll tell you the best part of the deal from my mind if you're a Hawks fan. Originally, John Collins was in the deal. Don't even call us if you're not going to give us Collins. They're keeping John Collins. So they're keeping your two pillars from last year, adding a guy like DeJounte Murray. I don't think it's going to be quite as bad. If I'm the Hawks, I run him at the point, and I think Trae Young has a more natural slide to the two guard. Like there's more of a scoring guard position. But we'll see how the basketball shakes out. But the fact that you could get rid of, Danilo Gallinari hurts to lose, but he's an older guy. Keep John Collins and get those two guys. I think it's a big win. And then it kind of screws the Knicks over because they already committed to Brunson. They're like, we're going to give you, I think it's like a 4-year, almost like close to $100 million deal. With the expectation DeJounte Murray was coming too. Well, now he's not coming. So now you're just getting Jalen Brunson on a massive contract.
Yeah, first of all, shout out to Jalen Brunson. The guy played out of his mind last season.
And the playoffs without
And
Luka.
The playoffs. The Mavericks went to the Western Conference Finals. Jalen Brunson was the second best player on that team. So whatever money that he gets for what he did last year, he deserves it. Having said that, this is such a Knicks contract right here, right? Like getting a guy who might be a top 25 player, maybe. That's being very generous. He's probably a top 50 player, and I'm talking 40.
That's a big,
I'm talking like 40 to 50 probably because I think I can sit here and name 30 to 39 players better than him.
Yeah.
But you're going to pay him a lot of money because there's not really another name out there that makes a lot of sense for you right now. You still have RJ. You still have Randall. You haven't done anything with him yet. You're going to have to, as the Knicks, go into next season with a similar team from last year, plus Jalen Brunson.
Isn't Robinson back?
Yeah, Mitchell's back. I believe so. Jalen Brunson's 6'2". He's a scoring point guard. You still have Derrick Rose on this team. You still have Quickly. All three of those guys are scoring point guards. And I guess you can call Brunson an undersized 2, right? You can call him a combo guard.
Yeah, but he's more effective with the ball in his hand. And as soon as you pay him $100 million, those other two names fit in around Brunson. That they're no longer in competition for the point guard spot.
Right, but this is such a Knicksian move. If you're the Knicks, you sort of have to be excited about this because it was the only move to be made now that you didn't get Murray. But the Knicks really missed out on Murray. They really missed out on him. And now
I think if we're talking Murray and Brunson together, that's a pretty good Knicks team.
Right. And now you have to go into the season with a team that didn't make the playoffs last year, and the only difference is Jalen Brunson. And I think he's a great player. Do I think he, makes you from a non-playoff team to like a 2 or 1 seed? No.
They'll sneak in at the 8. And you know what? Knicks fans are so starved for relevance, they'll be stoked about it. But it's a lot of money for a little bit of a bump. And we're not coming to Jalen Brunson. The dude he was a second-round draft pick, barely played in Dallas, earned it. He deserves the money. But, man, the Knicks really made some weird choices.
And again, this isn't against Brunson. I think this can be a top 5 horrible contract over the next 5 years.
He might bump Tobias out of the top 5.
There you go. All right, Brandon, that's it for me. Thank you guys for listening to 2 hours, no traffic, brought to you by Sideline Sports. I want to shout out Sonia from the Brownstones. She's moving to Mahwah with Lewis, Ethan, and Sage. Shout out to Sonia and her wonderful family. We're going to miss you over here at the Brownstones. Do you have any final words for the audience?
For what it's worth, Sonia does not listen to this podcast, so we're wishing her a happy move into the void. But if it helps, I mean, good luck on the move.
There you go. Mawa has Don Bosco, and a lot of great NFL players have been to Don Bosco. None that I can remember right now.
Yeah, me either. So, but they're great. I promise.
But Brian Cushing went to Bergen Catholic, and Bergen Catholic and Don Bosco are rivals. So we'll end the podcast there.